in the older periods, but even now, do find vestiges of these themes in various incarnations of goddesses that I will talk about. And I'm going to talk about specifically how these anxieties impacted material culture and how certain groups, such as Buddhism, sort of used that change in material culture to integrate themselves into the larger whole and bring out changes in the socio-political religious order. So with that, I'll start. Okay, so the aims, although I've briefly talked about it. So yes, I'm going to talk about the goddesses that emerged in the Buddhist monastic tradition. I'm also going to refer to parallels in different cultural and religious traditions because they're just very overlapping themes and goddesses, to be honest. So I can't really separate them into distinctive categories. And I'm mostly going to focus on the first half of the early half of the first millennium CE in the Indian subcontinent. And by Indian subcontinent, I mostly mean the northwestern central India. So I'm not really touching upon on southern India. So I'm also going to look at crisis, disease, and fertility as legitimizing channels. Where mainstream traditions became central and assimilated or complemented local folk traditions that existed prior to this. And how am I going to do this? Through Hariti, as you can see, a goddess that has been talked about quite a lot in the scholarly tradition, but with passing links to epidemics and disease, but not really. So, okay, a very basic map just to give you a geographical context of which region I'm going to talk about. So these are some specific sites where you do find Hariti sculptures in a large proportion. I am mostly going to focus on these because the sites in the Deccan mostly refer to the later half of the period that I'm talking about. And even in these sites, which were basically under this political entity called the Kushans, not sure how many of you might be familiar with them, which themselves were an amalgamation of different cultures, religions, controlled a lot of the Silk Route trade routes that were there, which passed through Gandhara and Mathura. So a melting pot of cultures, so as to say. Okay, so let's see epidemics and religion. What were the responses? How did Buddhism really react to the incident of a disease occurring in ancient India? So epidemics or diseases have been linked to moral and cosmological collapse. So a moral retribution of sorts, a vengeance that you failed in your fulfilling of a duty. And how can you solve that? By repenting, by asking for forgiveness, a theme that we will see in Hariti. Buddhism is also seen as a tool of monarchical statehood. Now, this was a period where urbanization was growing, and Buddhism did contribute to it because there have been links of Buddhism with monetary institutions as well. Tara, one of the associated goddesses, was the protector of traders, seafarers. So you can see that link. But Buddhism also emerged as this institution that protected you from the evils of urbanization. So, widespread disease, poverty, and so on. As I mentioned, there was a large extent of exchange and diffusion, not just of cultures, but also infections on the Silk Road. Although there's no proper archaeological record in the Indian subcontinent, we do find passing mentions in the literary traditions. And we can sort of, do a comparative analysis with the plague that happened in the Roman Empire in 165 CE, and that was a deadly plague. So there have been assumptions that this might, or a strain of that might have spread to the Indian subcontinent as well, the same time when the first sculptures of Hariti sort of emerged. And then there are attempts in the form of incantations in various literary sources, both Buddhist and Brahmanical, on how to combat diseases, which clearly show that there was certain awareness there. Okay, this is our goddess, Hariti. I'm not sure how clearly you can see the background image, but that's Raising of the Arms Bowl, a very famous painting that shows the story of conversion of Hariti. So traditionally, she has been mentioned in a lot of Brahmanical and Buddhist sources. Traditionally, she was a goddess who had 500 children. Some sources differ on the number of children, but she used to harm other children. And then one day, Buddha hid her favorite kid, and she was just lost in grief. And then she repented. She understood that her grief was not hers alone; it was universal, and that's how she became the goddess. A protector of children, goddess of fertility, protected you from diseases, and yeah, she has been seen as a potential temptress goddess with chaste rituals. So even if you see at the sculpture, it's you can see it's sexualized in nature. You can see that the fertility components are there, which I'll discuss in the ethnographical analysis. But most of the literary traditions mention chaste rituals in front of the Hariti sculptures or in her temple, so as to balance that inauspiciousness or auspiciousness of fertility that Buddhism quite often was in a flux of. And she has an ambivalent dual nature. She is violent on one hand, but she's also the giver of life. These are the several goddesses. I mean, this is still a very short list. There are many more. But these are the several goddesses in different cultures that Hariti might have come from, or they evolved from Hariti. So she has been linked to Tyche, the Greek goddess of fate and fortune, in the iconographical sense, as well as what she represents. That is abundance. She has Guan has been seen as a counterpart of Hariti in China. So the goddess of mercy, of compassion, of fertility, a guardian deity. And in all of these goddesses, there is one thing that is common: the vitality that they possess. They are dynamic. They all possess that dual nature in some way or the other. Okay, the iconography. So major components. As you can see, there's the cornucopia that's associated with Tyche, which is basically a horn of plenty. This can also be seen as a bowl in some other sculptural, depictions. That is also associated with, a cup of plenty, a bowl of plenty. You can see the pomegranate, which has traditionally associated with fertility and also mediating between death and life, coldness and hotness, another thing that is quite common in treating smallpox. So a very prominent component of that. And you can see her with kids. Sometimes it's 5. The number actually varies across cultures. And you can see that she is bedecked with jewels. She is never, just dressed plainly. You can see that she is a goddess of plenty, and that's a sculptural depiction of her with her consort, Panchika, who is also the god of wealth. And this is a comparative iconographical analysis with certain deities. So Ambika is a Jain goddess who is said to be the benevolent, manifestation of Hariti, while the bad manifestation is Bahuputrika. And she emerged in the later half of the first millennium CE. Here, the pomegranate changes to a mango branch. And both of them share that one single thread. Both of them were women who were, who suffered injustices. So Hariti miscarried in her previous birth, and that is how her story happened in the next birth. While Ambika lost her kids and her life, and that is how she became a protector. This is Negamesha, who is a goat-headed god. He's also known as a stealer of fetuses, but is also protector of one. Another major, not a major, but a prominent Buddhist deity. So what can we learn? So as I mentioned, through the figure of Hariti, what they're trying to depict is the universalization of grief. In a crisis induced by an epidemic, you would need that, and that fits in quite perfectly with what Buddhism preaches, suffering that is there. Fertility rituals are portrayed as unpleasant, but they are quite important, especially if you want to include women into your sangha as well. So, expansion of phase two. And, as I said, harbinger of death and giver of life. Also, the role of monks and nuns. So, they would also take kids into the sangha under the garb of protection, and how they would do it by using Hariti as, a tool. So one of the stories in one of the sources mentions that Hariti also gave her children to the Sangha for protection. And that was sort of used by the monks and nuns to, take children from the villages, nurture them, care for them, protect them from any diseases or whatsoever. And about the pomegranate, as I mentioned, a very mediating character there. Okay, almost there at the end. So the issue about incorporating local traditions also comes in. So I want to slightly move beyond the usual trope of conversion versus localization of traditions. What I would try to suggest, following from Julia Shaw, is that these deities or traditions sort of complemented the already existing local traditions. Hariti herself is seen as a manifestation of minor local goddesses. So in a way, they complemented the local traditions by keeping in mind both the religious needs as well as the practical needs. Practical needs in the sense, providing medicine, providing certain civic facilities that you would need in a city life. And again, the use of prominent theme of child death in women's lives. So conclusions or, further scope for study. The case of Hariti, as I said, it exemplifies the emphasis on collective well-being of a society during a period of crisis. And there's a constant mediation between violence and preservation of death. What would be great to do in the future is investigation of iconographical motifs in more detail to get a more insight into the archaeological landscape of epidemics in the Indian subcontinent. And there's also scope for shedding more light on the early epidemics in South and Central Asia through the investigation of local experiences, which sadly can be done through literary sources because we don't have any other sources. But yeah, and with that, that's the end of my presentation. Here's a list of selected bibliography in case you're interested. And yeah, thank you. And you can contact me here for any further questions.